Hello everyone, thank you for joining us for our info session on the Zero Net Emissions Agriculture CRC. We'll get started now. Farmers for Climate Action would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are meeting and pay respects to elders past and present, and we extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who may be present today.
I'm based on the lands of the Wurundjeri people in Melbourne, and we have attendees from all around Australia. So I'll hand over to you, Mick. It'll be a pretty short sort of session, not like our usual webinars, but we just thought this would be a great way to deliver information to our members so that you can all learn about what it means to be a producer demonstration site and be involved with the Zero Net Emissions Ag CRC. So over to you, Mick.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, and g'day everybody. I'm joining from Gubby country today up on the Sunshine Coast, and hope everyone's staying warm. And thanks for the invitation for Farmers for Climate Action to speak about this really exciting CRC. I'm not sure if you guys have been following the CRCs. They've been going around for about 10 to 12 years now, and we've had them in medical, and we've had them in policy, we've had them in homes and community and agriculture. So at the moment, we've got a couple of ag ones running around at the moment. We've got the Northern CRC and we've got the Food Agility. So the one that I've just started about 2 weeks ago, started working with the Zero Net Emissions CRC. Richard Heath is our CEO, and it's taken about 2.5 years to get the proposal together to deliver this funding project. But what's really cool about the CRC approach is instead of being 3 to 5 years of reporting, this is up to 10 years of reporting, and it allows us to get some really new and exciting implements and projects and pathways together. And probably not been a more important time to do this. I mean, if you're in ag or you're in land management, you would have heard a lot of the discussions about zero net emissions, carbon neutral, industries that are decarbonising, science-based targets. There's lots of stuff that's happening out there at the moment. But what we're seeing consistently is lots of things happening, but very little coordination. Some industries have got goals that have been set and well advanced. Some haven't done that, and some are just getting into the dance at the moment. So there's a lot of stuff happening. And so this brought about the start of the Zero Net Emissions CRC proposal. And there's around about nearly 90 partners involved in the process altogether. And a small group of them have been working for 2.5 years to get this together. We were successful about 12 months ago, and we officially kicked off last month. So at the beginning of July, we're up and running. We've got the CEO and the primary staff to get going. And so what I want to talk to today is about, firstly, why and what we're trying to do with the CRC, and then my role in the CRC, which is coordinating the demonstration sites. And then we'll talk about how we're going to, if the opportunity to test some of this research on property and what that looks like from a producer's perspective. And then we can open up for some questions and answers at the end. So very simply, the CRC's kicked off because we had so many partners. It's one of the most heavily supported CRCs ever. And we've got nearly $90 million in partner contributions to get us over the line when we put our proposal in. So what we've been able to do, once the deed was given to us, we knew that we had the money. We had some very early KPIs that the federal government wants us to tick off on. And so we've decided that we'd go out for a first call of projects called Fast Start 1. And then later this year, towards the end, we'll go into another project called Fast Start 2, which will get the actual research, who's doing what in the field and where does it fit. So we had some really some core guidelines that we are working towards. We've got 4 pillars that was put into the CRC proposal to the government. One's on low emission plant solutions. So using some of the known species and probably some of the lesser known species, working with the researchers to find out not only are they reducing methane in the animals or sequestering more in the soils or increasing productivity, bringing a lot of those plants together and saying, what do they look like? How much do they improve? And trying to set up a network of understanding around, if we're going to plant a paddock of this and it's made up of X, Y, or Z species, what sort of methane are we going to use, what sort of growth we're going to get, and then creating a framework of that so producers can make really clear discussions and decisions about what they plant in the paddocks and what they're going to get out of it. So the second pillar we've got is looking at methane-free sheep and cattle, and it's sort of looking along the lines of sort of genomics and different novel feeds, new technologies, stacking things together on a farm. So you're using 3 or 4 different things. You might be using a methane inhibitor, you might be using a anti-methogenic pasture or something else, and stacking it together so that you can actually get a claimable stack. The other one that we're working on is mixed enterprise farming systems, and trying to get us consistent. There's about 8 or 9 different tools floating around that beef producers are using, for example, to map their footprints, and they all come a lot of them are based on the work that Richard Eckhart did down at Melbourne University with the SB GAF tools or the dairy GAF. Those tools have been around for quite some time. Our idea is to try and bring all the different tools around, all the different commercial variations of them, and try and get some consistent numbers around. So that's the third pillar to work on. Not only that, if we're going to do all these things in the first 2 pillars, how do we measure it in an apples for apples kind of way across 4 or 5 commercial pathways and different tools and things like that, so that when you've actually got a savings or you're making savings, how do we sort of join that into our market space to basically create a model where we're going to get accurate fair income emission savings that we can put into the supply chain for our customers and their shareholders. And the final one, the final main pillar is delivering the value from that. So looking at, okay, we've done all this work. How does that start in the supply chain? How does that work? How can the agribusiness and farming communities sort of participate and turn that into a pathway? So they're fairly 4 quite unique pillars that we're working on, and some are really research rich, and some will be very new and innovative. And along some of those pillars, we'll also tie into some of the other CRCs are doing, like with soil and food agility and things like that. So there's plenty of crosshatching what's going to happen there, with the idea by the time we get to sort of year 5 or 6, we've got a really good understanding of what's going to go on the ground and actually start rolling out, commercial demonstrations and participation at scale in these things, moving towards the end of the CRC, where we sort of, okay, what's it look like beyond? We shut the doors of the CRC in 10 years' time. What's left? Who owns it? And where does it live? And how does it get maintained? So that's kind of the work that we're working on at the moment. And as I said, it's very early days for the team actually getting together. Just been together 3 weeks, and our first official board week next week, where we're going to select the first tranche of projects to come through, and that is basically the ones that come from the tier 1, 2 partners. The way the CR is set up is we've got tier 1 all the way through to tier 4 partners, and it's based on how much capital or in kind you're putting in on it. So tier 1 is at the higher end, tier 4 at the other end. And what we've done in this first tranche of projects is the tier 1 and 2 producers have put proposals in. It wasn't an open market proposal. It was decided that these guys had put their money up front, and that they were sort of implicit in the fact that we got this project because of their commitment. So the first round of projects that we put forward have come out of those guys. So they go to the board next week, and they will provide a range of research right across Australia that will address our early milestones for the government. But while we get to the second stage and the third stage of those project proposals, they will go out more broadly and bring in a much broader range of projects. And the reason we've done that is, tier 1 and 2 guys have put a fair bit of coin up front. The second part is, by the time we got those first ones and we're starting to meet the milestones that the federal government wants, we've actually got the opportunity to coordinate, okay, which bit of research are we missing? What are we finding what the producers want? Or we're finding some opportunities to tailor the next couple of investments beyond that. So quite a big body of work, and some of the work we've got at the moment around decision support tools and renewable energy and life cycle assessment maps and different novel strategies, different ways of sort of putting coatings on feed additives and fertilizers, and there's a really broad array of things. What we'll do when we get closer to knowing what they are and they've been the board's approved, and we'll be sending out a newsletter and regular updates of what those projects look like. So that's kind of what's happening in the background at the moment, and what my role is effectively to work out what the research is and where it's going to go, because part of the CRC, and it's the really important bit if you ask me, is doing all these sites around. What really attracted me to this role is there's an opportunity to do 25 demonstration sites around Australia across the different agroecological zones, and tying the major commodities to that particular zone to a commercial extension of the work we've done in the CRC. And that's quite unusual. It doesn't always happen. We get lots of on site or pot trials or lab trials. A lot of the time, particularly when I had my time with MLA previously, we'd end up with, there's your report, there's the case study, see you later. Now, nothing wrong with that, but what I'm really, really passionate about is the opportunity to get producers working with researchers as the research comes through the chain. And by the time it gets to the commercial demonstration side of things, what we've got is the opportunity to put the producers who have been following through the process in front of their peers and explain what they've learnt and along the way. So these 25 sites will be right across the zones, and right now we've got an expression of interest out from all partners, so tier 1 to 4, saying if you're interested, put your hand up now and show us what's on offer, where you live, what commodities you got, what your thinking is. And then the idea behind that is to build a national map of where the potential sites are, who's already got established research projects underway. Has somebody got a flux tower? How close is it to a city? All those bits and pieces. Have they done research in the past? So we're mapping all that out through these expressions of interest. And then the idea is once we start knowing what the research looks like, we know where that's best going to fit. And it won't be just one piece of research to one producer site. What we're really keen to do is to stack as much research as we can out of the CRC and provide 3 or 4 trials or tests or demonstrations on one commodity in that particular zone, or a different commodity over here. So the idea over the longer term is that we'll have a stack as many of the research, CRC research stuff on as many farms as we can across as many landscapes, so we get that regional nuance of what's happening. And also, more importantly, we get the opportunity for the innovation against what was found in, say, the southern industry might be a little bit different in the north, and that'll deepen our understanding and consolidate the research that we found. One of the things we used to always get in MLA, well, we come up with some great research, but it was done in a pot trial, or it was done at sea level down in Victoria, or somewhere in Gatton in Brisbane, and producers would constantly say, well, how's that going to work here? Well, that's what I love about this opportunity. We've got the opportunity to take that research and put it at scale on farms. And more importantly, those producers who are interested is to come into the research instead of providing me a quarterly report on what they've done at the research project. We're going to get those guys to communicate with the farmers who will be going to be using that research so that they can learn about it and then share it in their own words. And then you're not sort of, producers aren't being inundated with blokes turning up to talk at field days and events who don't have any skin in the game. It's the people who are in the hubs working with the researchers to make sure that's going to be fit for purpose in their particular commodity. So at the moment, expression of interest is out right now. I have shared the link around. If you haven't had a chance to get a look, I'll get Paul to sort that out, and I can share it again. It does close on the 30th of July. But that's not a big issue. It won't be the only one. As I said, with the project proposals, the funding itself, with what research is going to happen, that's going to be over 2 or 3 appeals for proposals. Same too with the PDS. Initially, we're putting the first PDS down. We're hoping to get as many as we can. But if we find gaps and places in that initial overview, we'll do a couple more calls to fit producers. Now, the other point to remember is these producer sites, you might not be committed for the full 10 years. You might be just doing that piece of research for 5 years, and then there might be another one come in who's 2 postcodes across it. So it's not set in stone, but the idea is as many of these producer demonstrates as we can afford across as many different time and land and commodity uses. We'll end up with a really good snapshot. And then what we want to take out of that is the information of what's happening, so that when we create the protocols and the tools and the methods, we've got a really constant and consistent way of creating really robust data and handling that in a way that if a producer's making a claim and it's going to go all the way through the supply chain, it's transparent and defendable. So we've got something that can actually help to be used to decarbonise our products as we particularly as an export nation where so much of it's going overseas. My last role was setting up a decarbonisation plan for McDonald's Australia and New Zealand, and we're using US and EU information, trying to manage an Australian system. It was really discombobulated. So the idea of being able to bring together and work on a common framework we can use anywhere in Australia to make a claim against a product or make an emission savings or whatever we end up getting out of that particular research, that'll be our end goal for what we're trying to leave as a legacy beyond the project. So by the time we get to 2035, this will be mainstream. It'll be tested across multiple landscapes and producers and commodities, and they're known as an industry or as a national product. It's really exciting times because there's also a natural capital CRC trying to get wings at the moment, and as you know, carbon and natural capital are very closely aligned. So to come to an end with some really good tools and opportunities to create a snapshot of your business and your natural resource management, it's a really exciting times to be doing it, and not in increments of 3 to 5 years as per usual, but in a big gust of 10 years with some of the most amazing scientists we've got in Australia. So really exciting opportunity. So just to wrap that up, the last thing to do with these expressions of interest is there's simply it's an online form. I can send both the link to the online form, because I don't think you can back it up and come back and do it later. I think you've got to you've got to complete the form and then submit it. And once it's submitted, it's gone. So what I've been sending around to the stakeholders who are interested is the PDF of it, so you can know what the questions are previously. You can write out roughly what you're thinking they're going to be, and then once you finish, you can submit it. They will get in to me by the 30th of July. We spend the next couple of months or so working through them, and then we end up putting them to the board with our solutions, with the aim to having the first 5 up by Christmas, and then over the next 12 months bringing the rest on. And the other really important point is there is going to be, we're aiming for about 4 or 5 demonstrations per state or territory, and also trying to put a coordinator in place to help manage those sites between the uni. So I actually get to come home occasionally, because once they get going, we'll be really busy and there'll be a lot happening. So the idea is that we've got a coordinator who's local to that particular state. So that's pretty much where we're up at the moment. And I think probably the best way to continue is if you've got any questions or things, I can probably answer them. If I can't, I can definitely find out for you.
Yeah, thanks, Mick. We will send out the form and the PDF version to everyone who's attended today after this via email. But if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A chat bit at the bottom of the screen. Otherwise, you can also ask them in the normal chat. So the first question was from Andrew, and he said, will you have a review/oversight committee to ensure delivery of milestones like the sheep CRC?
Yeah, good question. Yes, definitely. We've got an oversight one for each of the projects, and we're also going to have the coordinators and the farmer and the producer groups working together. So what my role will do, I'm going to have a producer steering group for all the sites. Then we go up to the research sites. They've also got a steering body, and then we've got an oversight committee that makes sure we're keeping on track. And ultimately, the main thing, and this is where the statewide coordinator will come in, they will be taking direction over their particular state and making sure that's all coming together. But we will be catching up monthly, probably a bit earlier, more regularly initially. But when we get up and running, it'll be at least every sort of month. We'll catch up and make sure that everything's on track, and then we can tailor back to work with those who are lagging a bit or having issues, or they've had drought or whatever the standard thing is, sort of thing. So yeah, we're really well structured, and more importantly, everything like we have at that level still has an approval level at the board too. So if we're having troubles, we go to the board and they provide their expert opinion on what we need to do next.
Great. The next one was, are you looking for a minimum hectare from landholders? So minimum farm size.
Yeah, so it'll good question. It'll depend on what the particular research or trial they're going to do. They're like some of these trials and tests that will, well, depending on which ones get selected next week. There was 15 projects put to the board, and the first tranche will be about 6 to 8 of those projects, I believe. So if 2/3 of them are going to be in a lab doing genetics for 12 months, we're not going to need a lot of hectares. But if it's something like a feed-based trial or a soil trial or a fertilizer trial, the idea is that if we can get the proof of concept research done on the ag farms and the research stations, once we're happy and we know that it's going to go, we'll go to the commercial scale, and that would be relevant. The commercial scale of a trial would be based on what's specific to that particular commodity. So saying 100 hectares of wheat, that's probably a plot trial, as opposed to sort of something in the southern industry as a pasture trial. So it'll be based on what is the average for that particular commodity in that space. But yeah, commercial trials will be full commercial trials.
Great. Is there space for a circular economy project under the CRC?
Yes, definitely. Under the delivering value from net zero, which is pillar 3. There's a lot looking at circular economies, and particularly around solar and alternative pathways. So that's one of the main ones we've got ticking away at the moment. And the really important part at the back of all those things, each of these pillars that we have, of the 4 pillars, will also have a few. They'll have micro credentials. They'll have PhDs and masters, as well as some university stuff. So we'll be bringing that to back upstream to the researchers, as well as back down to producers. So there is, but definitely stuff in the circular economy, and making sure that it's progressive impact, not sort of regressive.
Yeah, great. What involvement or input will the CRC have from Dairy Australia or other peak commodity groups and bodies?
Yeah, so MLA, Dairy Australia, GRDC, all of them have got their own projects on, and they've got lots going. A lot of them have got targets and strategies, and a lot of them are also members of the CRC. So with all our partners in that space, like the RDCs, we work with them really closely to make sure we're not duplicating too much. We're using a lot of established infrastructure that will help, but also the beauty of the CRC, we're not contained to, this is how MLA has done it for 20 years, or this is how GRDC has done it. This is new. And the way it was pitched to me, this is a greenfield site. We need to invent things that don't exist at the moment. So whilst they are all a part of it, and they're actively engaged in the work that we're going to be delivering at the research stage, we're really excited to be working with them to plan out what they look. So we've just had a meeting with MLA. We've got another one coming up with GRDC. And when we do the hubs and when we actually call the research out, we will align with those guys so that we know what the potential spin-offs or alternatives, or where they can work together very closely. So very much at the forefront of what we're doing across the major commodities.
Yeah, very, very exciting stuff. Will anaerobic digestion be included in research, emissions reduction and fertilizer replacements?
All of those are, we've seen proposals for all of them. And as I said, we had the first tranche of projects that came through. There was 16 projects, and we well overextended the budget for those 16 projects. So over the last couple of weeks, we've been working through them. The first 6 will go off before Christmas, and then collectively sort of fill out the rest to fast track 2 and 3. But there is a lot on methane, and particularly around brand digestion, but also particularly around the productivity gains, not just the emission save. So we've got about 8 projects that have come across, 4 projects that have come across, and between feedlot trials, new species of grass, and the genetic stuff, there's quite a lot that's happening there. And you put a few feed additive trials in there, it's really comprehensive stuff. And again, one of the things that's been missing in this space for a long time, a lot of the stuff, particularly in feed-based, has been happening for a long time, but it hasn't had the infrastructure around it to make sure that it is actually claimable or usable at scale. And that's quite much the important part of, with the early days in the hubs where we haven't got a lot of new research, we'll be doing a lot of baselining to say, well, where are you now? And if we're going to pull these 4, 5 or 6 different levers on your property, what's it going to look like? So we can actually get a real good understanding of what we're starting with and where we end up by 2030.
Right. How will findings from the different trials be made available to farmers? And when should these findings be expected to be occurring?
Yeah, well, the second part first, the trials and the tests and the research, they will be bleeding out the whole time. And this is why these hubs are so important. So some of the research we've got going might take 8 years to get something that's producer facing, but there'll be a lot of stuff happening on farm labs and trial plots, and so all the papers that we've got put forward, all the research projects, they've got elements where they're providing us things like case studies, any of their findings, progress reports. But more importantly, every 3 months we're going to be doing a webinar, very much like this, where each of the projects get to give us basically got 3 slides on what they've done and who's available to talk to it. And the other part of it is, once they start getting to the pointy end of that, they've also got a commitment to go out to field days, work with the likes of red meat updates or the grower days and things like that, and provide discussion about it. But again, as I mentioned earlier, the other point we'll be doing is bringing producers into these research groups so they can understand what's happening as it evolves, because I'd much rather a producer be asking that question at the middle of the research, not at the end, like, why didn't you do that? So that's kind of the thinking behind it. And sorry, what was the first bit of the question?
Yeah, how will different findings be made available to farmers?
Yeah. Okay, so you kind of touched on that anyway. Yeah, so lots of case studies, lots of webinars that will be open to the forums to discuss and ask questions, regular updates throughout the media and the channel. And the other thing is, we're going to be starting to partner with a few groups along the line, similar to what Farmers for Climate Action, Landcare Australia, Drought Hubs. We'll be communicating with those guys so we get a common message going out across all community-facing groups, so that we get a one and constant voice. So there's plenty of work in that. We've got a reasonably good understanding. We're just putting the communication strategy together at the moment. And depending what the research is and what timeframes they're going to have something that can go out and be interesting, we will start peeling them off sort of pretty much early first quarter next year. There'll be some updates. Well, this is what we've done and where we're up to. Here's our first research projects, and introduce people. Then by the time we get to the end of that year, there'll be the first progress, first case studies, first scenario. So it'll be very active in that space to make sure that everyone who, even if they can't participate, they're still aware of it and can come to the field days and the events.
Yeah, awesome. So there'll be a lot of information available for everyone. So what are the accounting systems used for emissions reduction? Is there any physical data collection, or is it all modelling?
No, so there's quite a lot of both. At the moment, we've got quite a few commercial companies and CRCs and different farming bodies or RDCs who've created their own platforms, and a lot of those platforms have been picked up and been commercialised. And so the idea is what Richard Eckhart will be working in now in the in the CRC to manage that. There's been I don't know if anyone's heard of it, but the AIA put together they've basically been working on through the food agility team, have been working on a carbon footprint tool that works for all commodities instead of, if you're a mixed farmer, having to go to 3 different spreadsheets. So the idea is bringing Richard into the playing and seeing what's out there at the moment, working out what's best fit for that particular commodity or that region and what's been adopted, and then try and create a common pathway that goes into one space. So the GAF tools that Richard and Melbourne University created about 10 years ago, they'll be at front and centre of it for the time being. But as the research and the understanding progresses, we'll be going to groups and testing and trialing it. Then even better if they've already used a tool, because then we're getting a comparison between, for example, we did a comparison with a tool in the last role. We had one from Steve Wiedemann with Integrity Ag, we had one with Ruminati, and we had one with MLA Edge, and we got quite different stories out of those things on the same farm. So the idea is to sort of create a more accurate pathway for, regardless of what tool you're going to use as a commercial entity. If you're going to use it with your producers or try to make a claim in the market, there's a protocol around what is the expectations, and therefore have enough ability to make that into underpin a methodology. So that's very much at the forefront we're doing. And the idea is bring as many together as we can and work on them so that we get the best available for all commodities with the least keystrokes.
Yeah, great. Another question, can anything be done to challenge the accounting standards which give no credit for cyclicality of carbon emissions by ruminants? I don't know if you'd be able to answer that, but that's one of the questions.
I'll have to take that one on notice. I've got plenty of opinions of it. I don't know I have the right answer. So,
yeah.
But yeah, there is a lot of there's quite a lot of that thinking about how do we challenge that that's not correct, or we haven't included that. And again, that's why I think the CRC is so important, because we've had governments and commodities make claims on what we're going to do by 2030. And it's a bit of a mess in between what's happening on farm and what's happening at the reporting end. And I know a lot of examples where producers feel they're getting hard done by, or they've done that work too long ago and they can't claim anything. And the idea is that if we can come out with this is what it looks like going forward, and we can be recognised for it, I think there will be a really clear pathway of how to defend and amend the protocols chosen.
Great. I don't know if you'll be able to answer this one either, but does the carbon calculator include carbon recorded and stored in water?
I don't imagine so at this stage, because I haven't seen it in the 8 or 9 carbon tools I use at the moment. But I imagine by the time we get to the end of the first 5 years and we've hybridized what's available, we would have accounted for as many things as we can account for legally and claim it in an international context. But more importantly, we'll be able to demonstrate the work that needs to happen in the subsequent 5 years to make that better. So there's a lot of questions around, well, what about this and what about that and how about this, and I've got wetlands, and that's the big problem at the moment. There's so many tools and methodologies that don't work together. And to make it even worse, when I go to the US with what we're doing, they don't accept half the things that we're doing. So most of our stuff gets exported, and a lot of those companies are owned by the US. Our 3 biggest companies that we export to are international giants, and a lot of the stuff that we have in our current pathway is fairly invisible to them. So, and to be fair, I would say we're probably 10 years ahead of the US in how this is happening, and they're slowly catching up with the way that they're recording and making it a national pathway. We've done a lot of that work already, and our research is really good. The opportunity is to consolidate it in a way and pick up those areas that those international, like around about 7,000 of the world's biggest companies are signed to this SBTI, Science-Based Target Initiative, and a lot of the protocols and methodologies we require aren't quite there yet. So that's the main body of work that Pillar 3 will be working on.
Right. If anyone else has any other questions, feel free to put them in the webinar chat or the Q&A section. Otherwise, we might just, yes, Kristen, there will be a recording sent out afterwards. And yeah, Farmers for Climate Action will keep all of our members updated on what's happening with the CRC. And I'll say again, for those that might have come late, that after this, we'll also send out an EOI form for those interested in being a producer demonstration site, along with other information, the PDF with all the questions and answers. So if there's no other questions, Stephen has put a question in. I presume there will be a need for record and data collection, site management at the demonstration sites. How will this be managed?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, Stephen. Yes, we definitely have to. I'm working through that at the moment. Some of the fallout from the first year of research and design, which we're sort of in at the moment, the design phase, will help do that. But the idea, what we're trying to do is get a common platform and common metrics so that everyone's recording the same thing. And that's where that information will flow into the work that Richard Eckhart will be doing in designing that one consistent framework and protocol for recording change over time. So that's why the first few PDSs sites will be looking at, we'll be doing a lot of work to develop what that looks like, but it's a critical part of what we're doing. So doing it on the lab and in the university, that's nice, but to actually get it on farm and have producers recording the change over time, the impact on the animals and stuff like that, that's the money shot right there. So we've actually got something that's tangible that we can show other producers that is meaningful. And again, by the time we get to 2030, we've got an infrastructure that works from the producer all the way through to the customer or the shareholder. So definitely in that space. And if I really would like to know that answer and answer it really efficiently now, but I'm probably about a month away from being able to say explicitly what it looks like. But it'll be as simple as it can and as less time consuming as possible for the producers, based on what we know today, what we've got today, and how can we improve that. But more importantly, it's got to be consistent across all the landslides. There'll be things that you can answer on one commodity that you can't answer on another, but as long as there's a core framework through the middle that is repeatable across all these sites, it's when we'll get apples for apples in the measurement.
If anyone else has any questions, feel free to ask them. I might ask a quick question. So the producer demonstration sites, are there any criteria for where those will have to be located, or anything that anyone should know in relation to those?
No, in the form that we've sent around, it asks them. It takes about an hour to fill out. It asks a few. They're not difficult questions, but ask about where are you? Have you got phone connection? How far is it to the airport? Little things like that. Because if you're moving staff around or you're bringing researchers out, have you got internet connection? Have you got are you committed to a 2, 3, 5 year opportunity? So the main thing is, what a lot of producers will need to understand that it's going to be taking a paddock out of production. You're going to have people you don't know trumping around your place, and they're going to be sleeping in your shed and coming and going at different times. So there is a bit of a commitment, and we have people who've done that and continually do it across the different industries. But if you're not aware of what those expectations are, it can be a bit of a start to people when they go, well, why are you turning up today? So we really are looking for people who are willing to commit to 3 to 5 years of hanging out with strangers, which isn't always a good fit with producers. They like being left alone a little bit, but it won't be 24/7, but there is a bit of inconvenience for the individual. So the main thing we're looking for is, well, obviously with 25 agroecological zones, there's going to be some in Whoop Whoop, there's going to be some close to town, there's going to be some in places. So it's got to be, one of the things that I'll be really looking for is, have they done any research before? What sort of stuff have they been doing on farm in the lead up to this? What's their understanding of the current situation? So where's their head at? Are they willing to host a field day, or is that going to be a biosecurity risk? Have they got infrastructure there to support certain products or tools or measurement implements in the paddock and things like that? So Pretty much all of them can be addressed on any site we choose. Then it then just comes down to the will of the individual and accessing that particular site. And we do, as I said, we do know that some sites are going to be just hard to travel with, like getting a flux tower to the Pilbara and having someone go up and measure that flux tower. That's a big job. So we still need them in that area. So we've put that into the budget. We know that we can do it. We just got to make sure that if we're going to put that flux tower on that property, it's going to be there for 5 years. We're not going to get the guy ringing us in 2 years' time saying, sick of these blokes turning up and not hanging around. So we want to pull out. We're going to try and be very strategic about how we do that.
Right. Is there money available to assist with hosting costs for landholders?
Yeah, there is. There's a host fee that's been, so we haven't actually worked out. We've got a rough idea. We've used how the university have done it in the past. We know how MLA does their PDS, and we've sort of worked around those numbers at the moment. But each one will be on a case-by-case scenario depending on what they're doing. Because if they've got 8 different research outcomes being stacked on one farm as opposed to 2, they're going to take a little bit more time and effort. So that'll come out in the wash. But yes, there's definitely, the farmer will be supported in their participation. I mean, they won't be retiring and buying the boat on it, but it'll definitely help with the imposition that it'll afford them.
Great. Are there any other questions that anyone has? If there isn't, we might wrap it up. Will the test results in any land contamination or disruption to environment? So will there be any impact for landholders?
I mean, ultimately we're going to be replicating what's happening in the paddocks. I mean, we won't be drilling up a pasture to put in a wheat crop or something like that. Basically we'll be fitting research to the particular business and the enterprise and its way it does business where we can. There's no major infrastructure going in, like we won't be, we'll sort of be targeting sites. If we need pivots, we'll be targeting a site that's got pivots. We won't be saying, well, we're going to whack some pivots up, do you mind? Most of it will be trying to fit in with that production system as best we can, where it's going to happen. So if you look at these 25 sites around Australia, I mean, if we can get a site that is sheep, grain, and a few cattle, and that makes up 70% of the production system, we'll be trying to get the best site we can that we can demonstrate 3 or 4 different research outcomes on one property, which is within a Bulls Aurora town and a train station or something like that. So if you're growing beef, you're not going to be asked to plant, vines or something like that. So we'll try and keep it as close as we can. No major infrastructure of what I've seen in the projects to date. We'll just try and work with that particular hub in its infrastructure to fit our needs is probably the better way of reversing it. But as far as environmental impact, I certainly hope not, because it means I haven't done my job. So we'll try to do it as friendly and as neatly and as cleanly as we can, so that the participant gets something out of it without feeling bruised. We've had times in the past where we've done producer demonstrates at scale with MLA and the feed base adoption plan. And by the end of those projects, the producers were just exhausted. There was 5 years, there was report writing, there was group meetings, there was field days, and they just put the flag up then in 5 years, said, don't call us for another 5, let us recover. They were excellent at what they did, but they were just exhausted. So that's just something to keep in the back of the mind in a changing cycle when you've got kids away or the season's changing or whatever. We're pretty well staffed, and as other universities and people are doing the work, but there will be definitely some on-farm personal impact for having to put up with scientists and shiny asses from the city coming out to look at your place.
Yeah, great. Well, if there are no other questions that we can answer here, please feel free to send them through via email to us at Farmers for Climate Action. There'll be biosecurity plans and everything involved on the producer demonstration sites.
Most definitely, yeah, yes, yeah. Standard operating procedure.
Standard operating as normal, which is great. So we'll wrap up there. Thank you, Mick, and we'll let you catch your flight. But it's been really informative. As I've said throughout, we'll send out an EOI and all of those details. And to everyone who's RSVP'd afterwards, so that you can submit one, with the due date being the 30th of July. Yeah, so thank you for everyone for attending. The recording will be made live, and we hope to see you at another one of our information sessions, and we'll keep you up to date on everything that the Zero Net Emissions Agriculture CRC is doing. Great. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.